Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squared for boxing news and views from around the internet. Joseph Parker's former manager, Sir Bob Jones, he is not held back with his thoughts on Joseph Parker's upcoming WBO world title fight against Hughie Fury in Manchester, England next month. He's provided a stinging assessment in a statement to me about the fight. He's also covered its build-up, Parker's career, and Parker's legitimacy as a world champion. Hughie Fury also cops it. So I would really encourage, especially hardcore Joseph Parker fans, because some of what's about to come, it may make your blood boil a little bit. Stick with the video. I've also obtained a response statement from Duco Events, Parker's promoter, to add some balance here. So I'll read that after Bob Jones's comments, but also throw in there some of my thoughts as well. So for those who don't know Sir Bob Jones, he is a property magnate slash tycoon, whatever you want to call it, commercial property mogul with several $100 million. His company is worth a lot more, but his personal wealth, well, in the hundreds of millions of dollars. He's been a feature on the business scene in New Zealand for decades, a rich lister. He's dabbled in politics, and of course, he is a noted boxing enthusiast. It's not like he's without pedigree. He's never been shy about coming forward and giving his views on the sweet science, or actually for anything for that matter. And he, of course, he managed Joseph Parker in the early part of Parker's career and was his mentor. So depending on what version of events you read on the internet, he quit his post primarily as Parker's manager over the direction Duco Events wanted to take Parker's career. Didn't quite agree with some of the decisions being made, decided to step aside. So, fair enough. He didn't have to stay in there for the long haul. As it's turned out, we know how Parker's turned out. He's currently the world champion. So, as a lot of you know, I like to source quotes and other information where I can. So, for the upcoming Parker-Fury fight, I put the feelers out to a few people, including Sir Bob Jones, to get their take on the September 23rd fight, its build-up, the undercard, and other matters, etc. So with that in mind, buckle in, let's go. Here is Sir Bob's statement. First, no one in Britain takes Joseph or his bogus title seriously. That's understandable. Joshua's promoters ensured Joseph's last fight against a nobody was shown in Britain to groom the public that he was a plausible future Joshua opponent. That exercise failed dismally. Fury hasn't fought in 2 years. Cannot punch. So I'll just pause there for a second on the statement. The next section, I've chosen not to quote Sir Bob, as the remarks are about Hughie Fury and his traveller heritage, and they do take on a disparaging tone. And in my view, they actually add little to the mix. So I'll just carry on to the next bit here. So overall, it's a hard sell, particularly with the all-important pay-per-view. The promoters are thus dependent on filling the 24,000-seat Manchester arena, reliant on ticket sales, given Fury is a local. But considering that he's only rated number 5 heavyweight in Britain, an absence of interest is explicable. As for the undercard, it's a lengthy one of mainly nobodies, designed for entertainment. This promotion cannot afford anything better. To add to Joseph's problems, Fury is a skilled runner and may be difficult for him. He could even win, but regardless, may make Joseph look bad. As I've constantly told both Duco and Joseph, patience is everything. He's young and should have kept boxing in New Zealand and learning instead of chasing a fraudulent title which only the gullible Auckland media and public bought into, that has utterly mucked up his career, causing inactivity. Joseph rang from Vegas for a chat a couple of weeks back. I told him his best interest lay in giving up this nonsense title and resuming his learning-based New Zealand campaign, in which he controls his opponents' selection. I think in his heart he knows I'm right. It's all rather sad. Wow. I mean, some of that, when I first opened the email, I wasn't quite ready for some of that. And I had to sort of pick my jaw up off the ground. I'll get to Duco's statement in a moment, but first it's worth pausing to take in Sir Bob's statement. It's certainly rare to get that degree of forthrightness from commentators, who are often worried about the ramifications of their words. So if we deconstruct that for a minute, there's elements of what he's saying that I either agree with wholly, in part, or at least I've mulled it over. Other things, well, I'm not on board with. Okay, so in regards to the title being bogus, well, I don't agree with that. I actually think, it's a legit title. The WBO might be the youngest of the sanctioning bodies, the recognised sanctioning bodies, but it is recognised. The others recognise the WBO. But I would say that, Parker, he's been campaigning down in New Zealand for most of his career. It's clear he does have a low profile. That much really isn't up for debate. His profile is huge in New Zealand, but beyond that, not so much. And you got to say that the profile wasn't enhanced by the Razvan Kajanu fight in May. So in that respect, Sir Bob's "that exercise failed dismally" comment, well, it's correct. In terms of Fury not fighting for 2 years and can't punch, well, there certainly has been a period of inactivity. And while he's not a noted puncher, he is off his pimple-related illness. So we will see if he's got any more zip in his punches come September 23rd. Apparently he has, so we'll just have to wait and see on that one. So the comment of, considering that he's only rated number 5 heavyweight in Britain, an absence of interest is explicable. Well, as we know, there's a lot floating around about poor ticket sales. Duco have rubbished comments on that and called it sort of fake news. And Hennessy Sports, who is the UK-based promoter connected to the Furies, well, they've just gone to ground entirely, not actually even addressing that issue when approached. But, like I pointed out in a previous video, if ticket sales were really going gangbusters, the promoters, surely, they'd be trumpeting that fact. We've seen it and heard it before. But they're not. But I guess balancing that point out, Duco has told me ticket sales is only one of 5 revenue streams. So we'll have to see where things go. But you can actually go onto that ticketing website and see large blocks where there's unsold tickets. How many tickets have been sold, we don't know because no one will say. So regarding Fury being the 5th top heavyweight in the UK, it's kind of debatable where you cut the rankings after Joshua. But I do think that the point speaks more to Fury's profile in general, which by all accounts, he's not a big name in the UK. He's not a massive draw card, not yet. I mean, we'll get an indication of it for this fight, because if the ticket sales are struggling, and on the night there's only a half-fill arena, well, I guess we'll sort of see what sort of draw the two are. The comments about Fury being a skilled runner and that it could be difficult for Parker, and even if Parker does win, he may look bad. There's no denying that is a possible scenario. A lot of people are talking about that Fury is a good mover, good with his legs, and will want to avoid Parker where possible, and potentially not want to get into those trading situations often at all. But equally, Parker could come out and blitz him. For me, I mean, the way that the fight plays out, well, that's dependent on which version of Hughie Fury turns up on the night. I think we know Parker in terms of, he's pretty much a known quantity. Whereas Fury, bit of a wild card. He's talking a big game at the moment, but we'll have to see what version of Fury turns up on the night. Comments around Parker staying in New Zealand? Well, there's one school of thought that says, keep building him in New Zealand, bring him along slowly, and really make the most of the learning opportunities. Obviously, Sir Bob, he is in that camp. He thinks Parker has been rushed along and could be exposed. The other side of that coin is, well, New Zealand, it's a small pond. And Parker, well, you could say, for the most part, he's outgrown it. I'm more in that camp. And the fact that Duco and Parker made the most of opportunities and translated that into a title, well, that's more than good luck. You have to commend that. Parker still had to keep winning. He was able to step it up and get the victories. He may not have looked great in all instances, but he still got the job done. This next one, in regards to the gullible Auckland media and public point. It's a very interesting comment. I've certainly made my views on how boxing is covered in New Zealand pretty clear previously. Barely a hard question is ever asked, let alone answered, and it's all rah, rah, rah sort of stuff. Yeah, and some of it, it's just flat out promotional material. It's not journalism. But I guess, I'm pretty deep into this boxing thing now. I mean, in that sort of hardcore thing. So, I mean, I see through some of the copy and go, well, that's repeating and regurgitating a couple of facts. There's not a lot of insight in a lot of these stories. But I guess, and this is where you got to credit Duco. The fact they've been able to craft out a persona for Parker and a narrative that's been lapped up by the grateful media and under-resourced media, well, that's a credit to the work that Duco has done. I mean, Parker has obliged along the way, and he's kept winning, and that's helped build his fan base. And obviously, he's been a really good role model in the way that he's conducted himself. And in New Zealand, where, we don't like tall poppies, Parker has sort of fit the mold of someone that New Zealanders can, really like and, grow to love. Didn't happen overnight, but it's happened over time. Let's face it, a few years ago, if you'd have said they're going to pack out Vector Arena with 12,000 fans for a boxing event, I would have thought you were stark raving mad. It would have been a massive stretch. So the casuals in New Zealand, well, they've certainly well and truly hopped on the Parker hype train. In regards to the rest and his conversation that he says he had with Parker, we obviously don't know what the other side of that conversation back to Sir Bob was. But I'm sure Parker would have kept it pretty respectful because he's that sort of guy. But all in all, a very colourful statement from Sir Bob Jones, so I thank him for his views. It certainly raised a lot of food for thought. I don't agree with it all, but he's raised some issues that, a lot of you out there, I'm sure you've at least thought or touched on some of those views. I mean, you don't necessarily have to agree with them, but I think there's a few things in there that sort of hit a nerve and you go, yeah, I can kind of see that. But in response, Duco Events, well, it's had this to say. So this statement, it's from its communication director, Craig Stanaway. Sir Bob Jones is and remains a valuable friend and confidant to Duco Events, and he is entitled to his opinion. Professional boxing is all about making as much money as a fighter possibly can in exchange for losing the least amount of brain cells. It's classic risk versus reward. By holding the WBO Heavyweight Championship, Joseph Parker guarantees himself $1 million plus paydays for as long as he holds the belt. As WBO World Champion, he is consistently mentioned in the same breath as Anthony Joshua and Deontay Wilder by the international media because he holds the belt, not in spite of holding the belt. Joshua and Wilder are both interested in fighting Joseph. They would have no interest in fighting Joseph without the belt. So it goes without saying, Joshua and Wilder and the international media believe Parker to be a legitimate champion with a legitimate title, which is in stark contrast to Sir Bob, who believes Joseph's title, in his words, is fraudulent. A unification belt against Joshua or Wilder is a multi-million-dollar payday for Joseph Parker. Sir Bob is suggesting Joseph give up that opportunity to make millions of dollars simply by dropping the belt. What Sir Bob is proposing is that Joseph effectively drop down to the level of, say, a Lucas Brown or Izu Agono. Do you hear Joshua saying, I want to fight Lucas Brown or Izu Agono? The answer is obviously no. If Joseph were to defend the WBO title 5 more times, he would likely earn enough money to be set for life and fulfill his goal of getting out of the sport by the age of 30. By not holding the WBO belt, Joseph would have 5-figure paydays, just like Brown and Ugono, and have to continue fighting well into his 30s. Remember, Brown is 38 years old and Izu just turned 30. They would love to be in Joseph's position right now. The reality is, if Joseph were to take Sir Bob's advice and relinquish the title, he would merely make enough money over the next 12 months to scramble together a deposit for a house in the Auckland housing market. and then he would still have to fight another dozen times to earn enough money to pay it off. And remember, Joseph earns a living in a sport where you are one punch away from either serious injury or retirement. Joseph is currently a 7-figure fighter who has already been able to pay off his parents' mortgage through the money he has made in his successful partnership with Duco. He earned more money in his world title fight against Andy Ruiz last December than Deontay Wilder made in his last bout against Gerald Washington in February 2017. On that occasion, Wilder was defending the WBC for the 5th time in America. Sir Bob has proven to be one of the greatest investors New Zealand has ever produced and has made hundreds of millions of dollars through sound financial decision-making. Sir Bob's savvy business acumen has enabled him to achieve financial independence and freedom. It's something most of us envy. If you take what I have said into account, yet still believe like Sir Bob that Duco is mucking up Joseph's career by going out of our way to achieve financial independence freedom for the Parker family, then we stand guilty as charged. So that was a Duco Events statement. That was from its communications director, Craig Stanaway. Some very, very salient points raised there. I 100% agree if Parker doesn't hold the belt, then he's not in the conversation for a fight with either Wilder or Joshua. And dropping the belt, well, that would be akin to washing potential earnings down the drain. And we're talking millions of dollars, right? It just wouldn't make sense. In respect of the Lucas Brown and Izu Agono examples, well, I can't help but feeling they are subtle digs there from Duco. Remember that Izu left Duco to get out of Parker's shadow. And Brown, well, when Parker was on the way up, Brown didn't want to entertain the idea of a fight, but started calling his name when Parker had effectively made it and leapfrogged Brown. Also a dig in there to Wilder. I don't know if that was inadvertent or not, but saying Parker earned more in his title shot than Deontay Wilder did in his 5th defense. Ouch. So just on holding the belt, just more on that. So, I mean, I think that, there is a perception held by a lot of fans at the moment, and this is sort of the counter to some of what Duco's saying, but it sort of does blend in with what they're saying too. So a lot of fans, and I'm saying fans in general around the world, not just New Zealand, not UK, but more broadly, but you'll see this in comments as well. And this is something Parker will have to prove. I mean, a lot of fans sort of have the pecking order as Joshua, Wilder, Parker, in that order. So I'm not saying I agree with that order, but that is the generally sort of held wisdom, the collective wisdom that people say, that it is in that order. So, I mean, really, my sort of take on it is, if Parker wants to sort of shake that he's the 3rd best out of the 3, well, he's just got to start really blasting through some guys, and he's just got to keep winning, and he's got to look good in doing so. Prove those doubters wrong. If you were reading the tea leaves there, also in the comment about the make as much money as a fighter possibly can comment that was made, well, you'd have to sort of say, well, a big money fight in the UK against like a Dillian White or Tony Bellew is going to be next. That's, of course, if he beats Fury. I mean, it's almost certainly a lock that they're going to stay in the UK, judging by that, and also from what other statements Duco has made recently. So, we have to see on that one. It would certainly fit in with that make as much money as possible, because Eddie Hearn, well, his fighters and his fights, that's where the money is at. Not in the US at the moment, it's in the UK in terms of the heavyweight scene. All in all, though, I mean, Duco, treading that sort of fine line of trying to be diplomatic and not outright sort of say you're an idiot and you're wrong. They're just trying to politely refute some of what Sir Bob's saying and basically, put out there, well, we think we've done the right job by Joseph, and Joseph is happy with the job that we've done. Certainly some colourful statements from Sir Bob Jones. What do you make of this? What do you make of all of that? I really do want to know. You can imagine when I did open the email from Sir Bob Jones, after I'd requested some comment from him. I wasn't quite prepared for what I was going to read, but But certainly it gets us thinking, doesn't it? And it provides a lot of food for thought. Certainly it's made this video a little bit longer than my normal ones, but really keen for your input. What do you make of this? Hit like, subscribe, drop a comment. Make sure you drop a comment. Follow me on Twitter, boxing_squared. Boxing_squared. I've only just started that up, so please follow me if you can. Okay, I'm out.